Om apayantu mamangani vakpranaschakshu shrotra balamindriyani chasarvani sarvam brahma upanishadam mahabrahma nirakuram mama brahma nirakarota nirakaranamastva nirakaranam meastu tadatmani niratiyau upanishadsu dharmaste maishantu te maishantu O shanti shanti shanti. May our bodies experience great health. May our life force flow unimpeded. May our minds expand in their capacity to know Brahman. For the Upanishads state that all existence is Brahman. Therefore, may we never deny Brahman. May Brahman never deny us. May there be no rejection of Brahman ever by us, we who are dedicated to the realization of the Atman within. May all the divine qualities cited in the Upanishads also reside within us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Good morning. We welcome you to our live streaming Satsang, which is the first in about a series of 4 or 5 weeks that we've passed. As I was away at the ashrams, SRV ashrams in Oregon and California, and we were worshipping the Divine Mother of the Universe with pujas over Navaratri, the 9 days and 9 nights of Divine Mother worship. And now we are here back at home for a 2 to 3 month period of classes, which will start this afternoon, live streaming, on the Shakta Advaitavada, that is the path of the Divine Mother as she clarifies for us and reveals the non-dual wisdom of Vedanta and other salient systems of philosophy in India. Whether they be Astika or Nastika, orthodox or non-orthodox, they all have something very valuable to contribute to this wonderful sweep of Mother India's wisdom. And not only do we hear lectures about that and sit in discourses and transmissions, get wisdom transmissions, but we also have to ask questions. That's called Atmavichara in our tradition, and get some answers to these questions that sometimes puzzle us. And in order to clarify our minds so that we can live in a natural state of peace and harmony, which is our birthright and our divine inheritance. And never, as Holy Mother Shisharda Devi said, never lose our peace of mind for any reason. Always must be able to maintain that at all costs, despite the changing vagaries of Maya that we're all subject to. So today's satsang here in the Hawaiian rain, I'll have to speak a little loud. That background noise you hear is that downpouring of water from the clouds. But we are welcoming here in Hawaii because we've had a rather dry spell. But there's another rain called the rain of Dharma, which the sages call about Dharma Mega Samadhi. That is, they say that there is this rain of teachings that's constantly there, falling upon the thirsty mind. And also there's the rain of grace. I might say 3 different varieties of rain that we can wet ourselves with and become nourished. And so in this rain of grace we receive these questions of Dharma Mega Samadhi from the Dharma, and I see that some of them have come in from students around the United States here to Hawaii this morning. So we'll pick them up and talk for about an hour with some solutions and answers to them. First question here from Portland, Oregon. You speak of individuals with clean karma, in that cause and effect of their actions is timely so as to realize the connection between them. For example, a person may commit a crime for the first time and get caught right away. versus not being caught. Or an action now not having its effect till years later, and the perpetrator doesn't remember or make the connection. What is it that determines whether one's karma is brought to fruition in a timely fashion or not? So, real question here, the examples aside, is what is it that determines whether one's karma is brought to fruition in a timely fashion or not? Well, if we take that word timely out of the equation, then it's time that brings everything to fruition. That is, people who must wait on the return, cause, the effect of the cause, sometimes have to wait a long time for the returns to their actions to show up in their lives or in their minds, or in action itself as repercussion. That's just the law of karma, and we know Swami Vivekananda had some very definite things to say about karma yoga, as does Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita in his karma and karma sannyasa chapters. The Holy Mother also, whom we just mentioned, said that karma is a law that really can't be sidestepped. You have to forbear everything. She said you have to pay your karma down to the last penny or to the last farthing, to the last annam, as we would say in India. So in that case, you're talking about a cause and effect accrual that will take some time. Everything here is cyclic, so it'll take some time for it to come back. And of course, that's not the most desirable way to deal with one's karma. So I would say there are two other factors here besides time that the wise and intelligent person might consider for cutting down karma. And that is, of course, intelligence itself, the presence of intelligence or lack thereof, and also sadhana. Sadhana means spiritual practice. So, what is it that determines whether one's karma is brought to fruition in a timely fashion or not? That's basically one's intelligence. That is, if a person is imbued with or invested with natural intelligence, which we see as a marvelous thing in some people, that keeps their life in balance and keeps them from wandering off the path of Dharma, getting off balance, letting the mind get off balance, then that's, of course, a natural way of dealing with karma. In fact, karma almost doesn't even come into the equation so much. Certainly, negative karma won't come into the equation. Mixed karma, which is sometimes harder to discern than negative karma, is also there, and that can be very problematic. But for a person with natural intelligence, their positive karmas are always kept up. That is, the definition for the word karma first is just action. There's no other energy attached to it, like good and bad or moral or immoral or something. Karma is just a sort of a matter of fact in the universe, and it happens basically in the field of action, the kshetra, as Krishna calls it in the Gita. But there's also a knower of the kshetra, kshetragya, one who knows the field of action. So that person who knows the field of action, knowledge sort of indicates the presence of the knower. And so they know from time to time what karma to engage in, how to dispatch it with the least possible negative ramifications, and how to forbear karmas that return in the case of action that hasn't been done properly. Swami Vivekananda used to say that the karma of a person comes back quicker. The karma of a more righteous person comes back quicker than the karma of an unrighteous person. Again, in the Gita, you see this karma coming back to all levels of being. All beings have to bear it. So it's just a matter of how quickly it returns. And that's sort of an indication of how to determine, as the question says here, how it will come back in a timely or an untimely fashion. So the answer would be, or the solution would be, try and bring forth your intelligence into the matter and use it. That's called buddhi, and we know some of the most intelligent beings in the world have taken that name. So the other factor besides the buddhi is called sadhana, or spiritual practice. That is, if your karma is neutral and you're a knower of the field of action, and you're not, as Sri Ramakrishna says about the best dancer, never really takes a wrong step. So, or if there is a wrong step, turns it into something spontaneous and something marvelous. So in that way, a person who's on the field of battle, the field of action, is always coming up against situations that are a bit of a surprise. You can be taken by surprise. So that means that a person will have to be facile, have to be tactful, and have to turn those negative poisons into nectar. As we say, Lord Shiva turns all this poison of relativity into the nectar of immortality. So that's a great challenge, and those who keep their lives balanced are best at that art of karma yoga. But those who are still trying to deal with it and make some sense out of it can often defer to this great practice called sadhana, or spiritual discipline. That will neutralize karma quicker than anything. There's even a karma of everyday life, like the killing of insects unconsciously, and the householder karma that happens when you live amongst people day to day and move about the town and so forth. There's always some karma of the family rising in terms of stress and strife and disagreement, and all of that really could be kept in abeyance or kept neutral by the participants of such a situation, all engaging in sadhana, or spiritual practice. That is, until the mind can be kept high in a natural state of intelligence, sadhana has to be applied. So for instructions on how to do sadhana, you have to approach a teacher, and probably the teacher will be telling you the 4 yogas. You should look into the 4 yogas. Some study every day, some meditation in the morning and night, the practice of increasing one's devotion for the personal God, whatever God or deity that the family worships or the individual worships. And then karma yoga itself is one of those 4 yogas. That is how to be able to dispatch the duties and responsibilities and activities of your everyday life in a clean and clear manner, concise manner, without accruing any residue. So that's a threefold answer to that question. First of all, time is the factor. So if you have to rely upon time, then it's an inferior method. Everyone's karma will return to them, just like the river returns. All things return, as Buddha said. Second factor is called natural intelligence. If you maintain that, if you have it, and you can maintain it in all situations, sthiti pragnasya, be a man or a woman of steady wisdom, then that karma will not be able to insinuate itself upon you. And third, if you don't have that natural intelligence refined or honed yet, or not able to hold it in every situation, then you must practice doing that. And that's called sadhana. So that leads into the next question I see, which is about the Gita. One student writes in, I recently had a discussion with someone regarding the significance of Arjuna going to battle in the Bhagavad Gita. A common question arose as to what to make of Krishna's persuading Arjuna that he must fight, that is his dharma, and that ultimately all beings on the battlefield were never really born and therefore cannot die. This person had removed an image from her home of Krishna driving Arjuna's chariot because people were offended by the image of war. Could you please clarify several issues that arose in this conversation with her? How to avoid someone drawing a nihilistic interpretation wherein the Gita is used as a justification for violence, co-opting the teaching that Krishna utilized to convince Arjuna to slay his enemies. And is there an argument in favor of going to war that a person or nation can draw from the Gita? Thank you for your thoughts. Well, thank you for your thoughts and your questions in return. To get more down to them specifically, how do we avoid someone drawing a nihilistic interpretation wherein the Gita is used as a justification for violence? Well, it's an easy one to answer, and that is, let's not miss the point. If you talk about reading a scripture like the Gita, which is not only superior scripture in India, but in all the world is judged as one of the greatest scriptures by other religions in the world too. Nobody can deny the value and depth of teachings of Sri Krishna and the Gita. It's influenced all religions. They draw from those teachings which are precious. So therein lies the point. Why are you concentrating on this one element, which is just the battlefield, again, the field of action, and overlooking all of these great teachings in the Gita, which will eventually help you to resolve all battles and all wars? You see, it's a kind of a conundrum and a contradiction that the human mind is always engaged in, is that they forego the truth for relative matters. They concentrate on mammon instead of God. And if they were to do the opposite, then solutions and that wonderful quality of ahimsa, non-violence, would be there for the taking. We would actually be able to man ourselves up with it. We'd be able to apply it in all situations, but instead we're concentrating on himsa, war, violence all the time. So much less taking Gita as a justification for war, we should take it for what it's meant for, describing the truth of God in 18 chapters, 18 discourses. The fact that it's happening there on the battlefield just should be a signal to you that you're in danger when you're embodied. There's a great teaching that Lord Vashishta gives, that when Ram, the young Ram, as a teenager, asks him about disease, and Vashishta says, basically, there's only one disease, one cause for all disease, and that's rebirth. So taking on the body in relativity is quite risky. It doesn't matter who you are, but if you are going to take on a body in relativity, then you're going to have to do it consciously, which is what these great beings that we're worshipping, Ramakrishna, Sharda, Vivekananda, Lord Buddha, Krishna, and the recent great beings like Raman Maharshi and Dalai Lama, who's had some 14 conscious births. So basically these beings are coming back and showing us again and again how to live in the midst of himsa while practicing ahimsa. It's not a perfect world. You're not going to be able to get rid of war. That's a pipe dream. There will be periods of peace and there will be periods of war. Just accept it. And the first noble truth is there is suffering. So the first noble truth is that there's no suffering. The second noble truth is there's a cause for it, and the third is there's a way out. So you have to accept first that there is suffering. You can't just sort of brush that under the carpet and then go on with your life sort of in an idealistic way, and then have your karma come back later and suffer. See, and have to learn that the long, hard way. If you want out of suffering, then you have to practice ahimsa in the midst of himsa. And that's actually, if you go on with this, the answer to this question, that's exactly what Sri Krishna is teaching Arjuna to do. First, by telling him that of the birthless, deathless nature of the Atman within him and within all the beings of that battlefield. The Atman is not only in the Pandava clan, but it's in the Kaurava clan too. All those evil beings also have Atman in them, untouched and pure. All the animals, even the chariots, even the rivers of blood, all have Atman in them, see, as the immortal essence of everything, the unchanging substratum underlying everything. So if you can realize that, which is not easy to do, especially in the midst of all this carnage, then of course you're a superior being. You have everything you need in that one truth. Teach me that one thing by which knowing all else is known, is one of the greatest questions ever asked. If you send that in to me, I'll discourse on it. It's a question. But if you cannot, and this is actually a teaching right out of the Gita, if you cannot yet see that the Atman is in all beings equally, in quality and in quantity, that there's no difference in the Atman in anything, it's the one Buddha nature in everything, it's the one Allah, it's the one Brahman. If you cannot see that yet, then you should know that everything that comes here is born, and everything also that comes here dies, and that the birth and death are a secondary relative truth to all of this, that karma is a relative truth, that reincarnation is a relative truth. Don't throw out the ultimate truth just because of the relative truth is standing there in front of you. You must work it out. So Arjuna has to go into the battle in a state of mind called ahimsa. All of his naturally non-violent tendencies should be there in a warrior. A warrior should be there to care for society. It's funny, people take a picture off the wall because they don't like war, but yet their own society is engaging in war all the time, and they're a part of that society. I mean, should Arjuna walk around as a conscientious objector, with a sign on the battlefield of Kurukshetra? See, or is he a warrior? Does he have to go there to win the day from an unjust cause, from violent people who have no idea about nonviolence? They just want to commit violence. So someone has to be there to teach them. So there are all levels of that in the Gita. While we're on the subject, let's just stand up here for Sri Krishna, as if he needs our support. But basically, they say here, is there an argument in favor of going to war that a person or nation can draw from the Gita? Yeah, read the Mahabharata. The Gita is just one little chapter in this huge epic called the Mahabharata. And you're taking it out of context if you read the Gita and then criticize it for happening in war. See, war is your everyday life. You might not be in actual war with weapons, but in a sense, everyone's in war all the time with weapons. The weapons of intelligence or non-intelligence. There are shields and weapons and all sorts of devices that people are using to commit violence or to commit good acts or to commit good acts of stupefaction and bad acts of stupefaction. That's a great teaching from Lord Kapila of the Samkhya tradition. Good acts of stupefaction and bad acts of stupefaction. There are even bad acts of good stupefaction. You see, that people commit bad acts and they turn good without even their intention, you see. So this is the field of karma. This is what you're up against. So back to my main point about that, and this could take up the whole hour, of course, this one question, is that let's look into the Mahabharata and see how Sri Krishna did everything possible to avoid that war on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. For days, weeks, and months beforehand, before the battle even took place, he was mediating between the two clans and trying to get them to see reason, trying to find ways to solve this so it would never come to violence. And when he finally did enter the war, he entered it as the chariot driver. He wasn't committing violence. He stayed nonviolence the whole time. So the Lord is always the example, is always the exception to the rule. And those who love the Lord and follow the Lord, they too become righteous, dharmic, and they attain to nonviolence in thought, word, and deed. And even if they have to commit so-called violence in the battlefield, they don't accrue any karma by doing it because of their pure-minded stance. They love the Lord more than they love the world. Seek ye first the kingdom. So in that case, we must look into all aspects of this picture, you see, that is presented to us by this beautiful scripture called the Gita. Its setting, its preliminaries, its conclusion. Because Krishna, speaking about his conclusion, Krishna knows that the end of the age is coming, and that there's going to be a great conflagration and everything's going to go into pralaya. That happens every so often. Everything just goes into dissolution. It's rather like your deep sleep state tonight, when it's like you're waking up in the morning was your birth, and your day was your life, and then going to sleep at night was your death. You lived one lifetime in 24 hours, and that's happening over and over and over again. When everyone wakes, and everyone lives, and everyone goes into deep sleep at the same time, that will be pralaya. There will be no form. And that will be over a much longer span of time. All happening in an eternal moment, of course. That's the Advaitic way. Tune into our class this afternoon for more on that. So let's look at all sides of the picture then, and before we go taking pictures of great souls off the wall because of our weakness. See, we must man up. We must be strong, because here we are on the battlefield, whether you call it Kurukshetra or whether you call it America or whether you call it the Middle East. And if we want to leave this world without any karmic baggage, as both these questions are really pointing at, then we must learn how to be nonviolent in act, word, and deed. And when violence is called upon us, we must be able to do it in nonviolence. We must be able to meditate on both form and formlessness, and in the same way we must be able to keep our nonviolent attitude even in the midst of the worst strife, because it's going to come to us in this world. It's a matter of course. It comes to everyone. Death is a kind of battle we have with death, you see. We have to transcend death. So that's a battle that's going on in the field of your own mind all the time. So strength, boldness, fearlessness, courage, those are the kind of watchwords that we will have to keep close to us when we consider a question like that, and when we try and deal with it with any kind of an answer. So, justification for violence, how about a justification for nonviolence? Let's see the real underlying meaning of what Krishna is all about there in that battlefield, in that scripture called the Bhagavad Gita. All about evenness, all about one-pointedness of mind, all about healing the rifts that are developing between various warring factions, egos, trying to bring them together, concrescence of the human spirit and of all situations. Those are the lessons to be drawn, and they're not to be thrown out or like the baby with the bathwater, just because there's a little violence involved. There's a little violence involved with everything, even making dinner, even going to sleep. You're destroying the whole world when you go to sleep, because the world's not really real. And that actually gets us into this next question. Joshua from Oregon, welcome, says, several times in the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna questions the idea that the Vedantists' ideal that the world is illusory. Why does he do this? Is it because he has transcended the neti-neti stage and sees the relative plane as just another facet of pure consciousness? Is his Vedanta thus more mature than those who just say the world is illusory? Yes, and yes, to both of those conclusions you made to your own question. However, it doesn't mean the world's not illusory just because he looks at it from his own higher standpoint. As long as you're in the process of working through the vagaries and vicissitudes of this world, then you're going to have to pass through that stage, which was labeled here neti neti. That means not this, not this. And that kind of practice has been very effective for hundreds and thousands of beings for hundreds and thousands of years and cycles that they've practiced this. And others have practiced puja, worship, in order to solve their issues and problems. Holy Mother used to say that just because you have some Advaitic understanding, non-dualism, doesn't mean that you can pull the carpet out from under those people who are still proceeding by devotion and by worship. Hundreds and thousands of people have got their salvation through worship, and you mean to take it away from them? So you have to look more at the temperaments of people before you start prescribing this and that out of thin air. See? In fact, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be looking at the makeup of the situation. Some people are studious, some people are contemplative, some people are active, some people are devotional. And there's a yoga for each one of those, you might have noticed. And they've been provided and prescribed by the realized seers. So in that way, you should probably be looking at all sides again, just like we were just talking about the Bhagavad Gita. Look at all sides of humanity, all the temperaments there, and what is best for each person. That's called Loka Sangraha. Sri Krishna had it in spades. That is, he's looking for the highest and best for all beings on all worlds and all levels. And only a great soul like that can have such an ideal and keep it. So, you also have to take in consideration that Sri Ramakrishna was a man of many moods, many samadhis, and all of them passed across the features of that great soul. Sometimes he would be in an intensely devotional mood, and in that mood he would say, "Oh, the world's illusory. I don't buy it." You see, and another time he would be in a very discriminating mood, coming out of samadhi, and he would be working with certain people and having to tell them that they had to increase their discrimination. If you look around the world today, the lack of discrimination is very obvious in all things, not just in spiritual life. People can't discriminate what action to do and what not to do, for instance, going back to the karma yoga questions. So until one can determine what is best to do and what's not best to do, and what's of mixed variety, that is, karma, akarma, and vikarma, Krishna calls it in the Gita, then it's better to reserve yourself and proceed cautiously. See, neti neti might be a good path for those people. Or for another temperament, devotion, in intensifying one's devotion for Ishvara, for the chosen ideal, would be the best path for them. So, again, the wise teacher will be able to discern temperament to temperament, path to path, which way to send a soul who wants to solve the problems of life and get into a peaceful state of mind. So let's again look at Sri Ramakrishna as a many-sided being who had many kinds of samadhis and who was working, an avataric soul who was working with the whole warp and woof of society, of all societies too, because he's now here amongst us in America, and the world now has some 5-6 million souls worshipping him. So this is a Jagat Guru, this is a world teacher, and of the highest order, Paramhamsa, an avatar. So if we look at him like that, then we'll be able to see that he finds a place for everything by avastas, by stages. He used to teach by stages. You can't give all your 4 children fish steak. See, some of them don't have teeth, so you have to make fish soup for them. So Others you just have to make little pieces of fish mixed with rice because they have a little bit better powers of digestion. So the avatar is a soul who works like that. He sees the powers of spiritual digestion are very weak in some, not developed, underdeveloped, maybe completely absent in some. The fallen and the lowly, they're called. And then in others, there's more power of digestion, and some are very, very healthy already. See, so the avatar, since the Atman is the same in quality and quantity in all of them, will cater to all of them at the level that they understand it. And so Neti Neti is going to be Vedanta, the world of solution, is going to be perfect for some souls. Just what they need to hear at that particular time in their series of lives. And then for others, when it's time to dance and sing, well, Neti Neti goes out the door for a while, you see. And we engage in bhakti and love the Lord. Beautiful story I heard read to me recently was how Vivekananda lays down at night, he says. This is from his own words. He lays down at night. And he says, when I lay down to go to sleep, then I get deeper and deeper, and more peace comes to me, and I get peaceful and more peaceful and more peaceful, until finally bliss starts to happen. And then the bliss gets so intense that I can't sleep, and I have to stand up and dance around the room. Now, there's a soul who's got his natural intelligence, you see. He's imbued with his own natural intelligence. He just lays down. Peace is his bottom line, you might say. That's his foundation. That peace increases to bliss, and that bliss becomes so intense that he can't do anything but stand up and dance around. So, where's sleep, you see? And that's actually an answer to one of these other questions here. What are the non-obvious signs that the ego is beginning to ripen? What states will the aspirant obtain early on as the ego begins to ripen? So, teachings in the gospel, apakvahamkara, there's the unripe ego and there's the ripe ego. Sri Ramakrishna says the unripe ego is the cause of all problem, and the ripe ego is just a matter of surrender to God. So if you can get the ego out of the way, then you can live this divine life, natural intelligence again. Maybe even sadhana will not be so much in the picture for you, because you'll be naturally balanced, depending on how deep and how honed you want to make your intelligence. But the stages that the ego goes through is what I just said. First, it's happiness. That's the first sign of a person whose ego is beginning to dwindle. Then it's contentment. Then it's peace. Then it's bliss. And finally, it's transcendence. There is no ego in the end. And then a person can come back and take up the ego again as a station and abandon it at will. Can attach and detach at will. So those are a good fivefold stages of what the unripe ego passes through when it begins to ripen. The peace that passes all understanding, or wake up to note the song that had its birth far off, where worldly taint could never reach, in mountain caves and glades of forest deep, whose calm no sigh for lust or wealth or fame could ever dare to break, where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. Sing high that note. So knowledge, natural intelligence, truth dawns on you, and then bliss, and you stand up and dance around. See, it starts off very quiet and considerate, then realization, and then you're left in bliss, and that's an answer to both these questions. Then in the gospel, you have to know that Ramakrishna had all those states, and he was just a natural human being. You could call him an avatar, you could call him a paramhamsa, you could call him a great seer, but really what we like to call him is just a natural human being, the way human beings should be. When you study Ramakrishna, that's what you will see. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi said that about him. He said, when we see Ramakrishna, we just see God face to face. So there's your divine nature staring at you. There's your ideal. That's who you want to be or be like. Another question here, as we're almost out of time, is, can you explain the master's story about the servant counting pennies to purchase supplies? The stories I've gathered of Sri Ramakrishna in this book, are called Sri Ramakrishna stories. Now, many of the Swamis in India and also here in the West, a couple of the New York centers and so forth have loved this book very much. And it's just that I went through the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and gathered every story and anecdote, leaving the teachings sort of aside because the pages are peppered with many teachings, but just the stories alone, culled them all out, I think about 700 of them, put them into categories, and then commented on them. So when I saw this question at meditation this morning, I saw that I would have to answer it, I looked it up in my own book, just to refresh myself, and I remembered that when Sri Ramakrishna told that story of the servant who comes and gathers pennies to go shopping for the master. See, so he has to, but these pennies, so let's be culturally correct here, these rupees, or these annas, are for brinjal, or for cauliflower, gobi, or for eggplant, see, or for carrot. So he has little stacks of pennies to pay for each one of these different vegetables. And then he says, okay, it all adds up now, and he swoops all the pennies into one purse and walks off to the market. So they're all nicely divided for separate purchases, but when he actually goes to market, they're all together. What's Ramakrishna saying? He's talking about the cosmic gods and goddesses, how they're all the same in the end. So people worship Krishna, they worship Shiva, they worship Divine Mother, they worship all these Ganesha and so forth, they worship Christ and Buddha. So that's like people putting all of the worth, you see, in that one particular ideal that they love, and seeking and finding salvation, and hopefully even getting liberation through that particular god, goddess, deity, avatar, or great soul, world teacher. But in the end, when you go to God, all these deities just become one. And that was beautiful. Holy Mother said that same thing. In the end, you must know that my mother, only my mother exists. All beings become one in the end. So she's talking about this mother intelligence. And find out more about that this afternoon. In some 6 hours or so, we will start into our 7-series class of Shakta Advaitavada, a very wonderful word that takes up the path of non-duality under the auspice of the Divine Mother, Shakti. And we will go deeply into that using a few visuals and charts that you know me for. I'm not a listless person, and I like to chart consciousness. So we will have all of those available this afternoon for you. And in the meantime, please ponder the answers to these questions in your meditations, and we will be with you next Saturday for more, if you like this process of Atma Vichara. Next Sunday morning. And you may send in questions during the week, and we'll collect them and try and get to them at each satsang. So for the next couple months, you'll be here with us on Sundays, I hope, for satsangs and classes in the morning and afternoon. So here we will say Namaste and Aloha from Hawaii. Paramahanta Ramakrishna